The crystalline palace of Nexus Prime sparkled like 1,000 dying stars, its translucent spires stretching toward the triple moons that hung low in the violet sky. King Zafrix stood at his daughter's bedside, his iridescent scales dulled with worry as he watched her fragile form struggle for breath. The royal physicians hovered nearby, their tentacles intertwined nervously as they monitored her vital signs. "Your Majesty," First Physician Calyx whispered, his voice rippling through the crystalline chamber. "Princess Lunara's condition continues to deteriorate. Her outer shell grows more brittle with each passing cycle." Zafrix's facial ridges furrowed deeply, casting shadows across his pearl-white features. How he demanded, his usually melodious voice cracking with desperation. How can the heir to the mightiest empire in the Andromeda galaxy be so fragile? The question echoed through the chamber, bouncing off the prismatic walls like a haunting melody. Princess Lunara stirred slightly, her transparent skin revealing the weak pulse of her 3 hearts. Unlike other Nexarians, whose crystalline bodies could withstand the impact of micrometeors, Lunara's shell was as delicate as morning frost. "We've consulted healers from every corner of the Empire," Calyx continued, gesturing with his upper tentacles toward the holographic medical charts floating above the princess's bed. "The quantum monks of Vega 9, the bioarchitects of the Spiral Arm, even the legendary mist weavers of the Carina Cloud. None have seen anything like this before." Zafrix pressed his forehead against the cool crystal wall, remembering the day Lunara was born. The celebration had lasted for 3 standard months. The birth of an heir was always cause for jubilation among the Nexarians. But their joy had turned to horror when they discovered her condition. Her crystalline structure hadn't properly formed, leaving her vulnerable to even the slightest physical stress. Father Lunara's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the room like a plasma blade. "Are you worried about me again?" The king turned, his face softening as he met his daughter's gaze. Despite her weakness, her eyes sparkled with an inner fire that reminded him so much of her mother. "No, my starlight," he lied, moving to sit beside her. "Just discussing boring royal business." Lunara attempted to sit up, her translucent form catching the light and creating rainbow patterns on the walls. "You're a terrible liar, father. Your scales always turn slightly purple when you're not telling the truth." A chuckle escaped Zafrix's lips, though it carried more worry than mirth. "Just like your mother. She could always see right through me too." "Technically," Lunara quipped, her voice stronger now, "everyone can see through us. We are crystalline beings, after all." The gathered physicians tried to suppress their amusement, their tentacles wiggling with barely contained laughter. Even in her weakened state, the princess's wit remained sharp as a diamond edge. But the moment of levity was short-lived. As Lunara attempted to reach for a floating data crystal nearby, a hairline crack appeared along her forearm. She winced, and the room fell silent. "Enough," Zafrix declared, rising to his full height of 12 feet. His royal armor caught the light, sending prismatic reflections dancing across the chamber. "I will not stand by and watch my daughter, the future of our empire, waste away in this crystal cage. There must be someone in this vast universe who can help her grow stronger." First Physician Calyx cleared his throat, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Your Majesty, there might be one option we haven't considered, though it's rather unorthodox." Zafrix's head snapped toward the physician, hope flickering in his crystalline eyes. "Speak." "Well," Calyx began, his tentacles twisting nervously. "Our deep space scouts have recently made contact with a species from a small solar system in the Orion Arm. They call themselves humans. The holographic display hummed to life in the Grand Strategy Chamber, projecting a 3-dimensional image of a peculiar bipedal species. King Zafrix leaned forward on his crystalline throne, watching intently as Captain Naira of the Deep Space Reconnaissance Fleet delivered her report. "We first encountered them at Trading Outpost Beta 7, Naira explained, her silver scales shimmering as she manipulated the hologram with precise gestures. "At first we thought they were rather unremarkable. No natural armor, no enhanced sensory organs, no energy manipulation abilities. Just soft, squishy creatures barely worth noting in our xenological databases." Then why Zafrix interrupted, "Are you bringing them to my attention when my daughter's life hangs in the balance?" Naira's face split into what the king recognized as her species' version of a grin. "Because, Your Majesty, we witnessed something extraordinary." She waved her hand, and the hologram shifted to show recorded footage from the trading outpost. The assembled court watched in stunned silence as a human female sprinted across a loading dock, leaped over a malfunctioning cargo loader, and tackled another human out of the way of a falling storage container. Both humans hit the ground hard, rolled, and stood up laughing. They should have shattered, Second Physician Morix whispered, his tentacles twitching in disbelief. That impact force would have cracked even our strongest warriors. Precisely, Naira continued, clearly pleased with the reaction. But it gets better. Watch this. The next recording showed a human male in what appeared to be some sort of training facility. He was repeatedly striking a padded surface with his limbs, moving with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for such a solid creature. Sweat poured down his skin, but he continued his exercise for what the timestamp indicated was over 2 hours. Their bodies actually become stronger through stress and impact, Naira explained, her voice filled with wonder. Instead of cracking or breaking, their muscles and bones adapt. They call it training or conditioning. King Zafrix rose from his throne, approaching the hologram. And they can teach these methods to others. Yes, Your Majesty. They have countless specialized trainers who help others of their kind become stronger. Some humans start as weak as she paused, choosing her words carefully, as physically limited as Princess Lunara, but through these training methods, they transform themselves into powerful warriors. The king circled the hologram, studying the human's movements with intense focus. And you believe one of these trainers could help my daughter? With all due respect, Your Majesty, First Physician Calax interjected, his voice wavering with concern. The princess's condition is unique. These humans might be resilient, but they're not crystalline beings. Their methods could shatter her completely. Or Naira countered, their understanding of building strength from weakness could be exactly what she needs. Our traditional methods haven't worked. Perhaps it's time for an untraditional solution. The chamber fell silent as all eyes turned to King Zafrix. He stood motionless, watching the footage loop again, humans running, jumping, fighting, falling, and always getting back up. Their resilience was almost beautiful in its simplicity. Captain Naira, he finally spoke, his voice resonating through the chamber. How quickly can you arrange contact with one of these human trainers? Actually, Your Majesty. Naira's scales rippled with excitement. I took the liberty of making some preliminary inquiries. There's a human training facility on Europa Station. They specialize in rehabilitation, helping injured or physically weak individuals regain their strength. One of their top trainers has expressed interest in an unusual challenge. Name your price, Zafrix declared. Whatever resources you need, whatever payment this human demands, make it happen. There is one small complication, Naira added, her scales shifting to a slightly darker shade. The human insists on meeting Princess Lunara first. They say they need to assess her condition personally before agreeing to help. The king's crystalline form caught the light, sending rainbow refractions across the chamber walls. Then we shall welcome this human to our court, he declared. But first, tell me more about this trainer. Who are they? The royal court buzzed with anticipation as the massive crystal doors swung open. Captain Naira entered first, followed by a figure that made several courtiers gasp audibly. The human stood nearly 6 feet tall, her dark skin contrasting sharply with the gleaming crystalline architecture. She wore simple black training clothes, her muscled arms exposed, and her long hair was pulled back in tight braids. Your Majesty, Naira announced, I present Alexandra Rodriguez, master trainer from Europa Station. Alexandra stepped forward, her combat boots echoing against the crystal floor. She bowed, not the elaborate courtly gesture the Nexarians were used to, but a quick, athletic movement. Most people call me Steel, she said, her voice carrying a hint of amusement at the formal atmosphere. Because of your strength, King Zafrix inquired, studying her with undisguised curiosity. Steel laughed, a sound that bounced off the chamber walls like music. Because I'm stubborn as hell, Your Majesty. Once I set my mind to something, nothing can bend me away from it. Several courtiers bristled at her casual tone, their crystalline forms vibrating with indignation. First Physician Calax's tentacles twisted in disapproval. This is the royal court of Nexus Prime, he reminded her sharply. Perhaps you could show more. More what? Steel interrupted, crossing her arms. More fake politeness? More fancy bowing? With all due respect, I'm not here to play court games. I'm here because you have someone who needs help getting stronger, and that's what I do. Before anyone could respond, A weak voice called out from the side chamber. "Father, is the human here?" The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Steele's confident expression softened as Princess Lunara emerged, supported by two attendants. The princess's crystalline form was so transparent she seemed almost invisible in certain lights, with only a faint rainbow sheen marking her presence. "Well," Steele said quietly, all traces of sarcasm gone from her voice, "you must be my new student." Lunara attempted to stand straighter, though her legs trembled with the effort. "I am Princess Lunara of the Crystalline Empire," and a crack appeared along her shoulder, making her wince. Steele moved forward instinctively, but stopped when several guards raised their weapons. She held up her hands. "Easy there, Sparkles. I just want to take a closer look." To everyone's surprise, Lunara laughed. "Sparkles? Did you just call the royal guards Sparkles?" If the shoe fit, Steele shrugged, then caught herself. "Sorry, Earth expression. Means if something's true, might as well say it." "Tell me another Earth expression," Lunara requested, her eyes bright with interest. Steele thought for a moment. "How about tough as nails?" "That's what you're going to be when I'm done with you." "But I don't want to be tough as nails," Lunara replied, managing a small smile. "I'd prefer to be tough as diamonds." This time it was Steele's turn to laugh. "Oh, I like you, Princess. You've got spirit. That's the most important thing, more important than any fancy training equipment or special techniques." King Zafrix watched this exchange with growing hope. He'd seen something in his daughter's eyes he hadn't witnessed in years, a spark of real excitement. "So," Steele said, turning to face the king, "here's the deal. I'll help your daughter become stronger, but we do this my way. No interference from court doctors, no override of my methods unless there's immediate danger. And most importantly," she looked back at Lunara, "the princess has to want this. Really want it. Because I won't lie, this won't be easy." Lunara straightened up again, ignoring the small cracking sound from her joints. "When do we start?" "What in the 7 moons is that?" First Physician Calyx demanded, his tentacles writhing in alarm as Steele poured a thick, blue liquid into a crystalline basin. "Water mixed with mineral supplements," Steele explained, testing the temperature with her hand. "Princess Lunara's first lesson won't involve any physical training at all." The private training chamber, once filled with traditional Nexarian strengthening equipment, had been transformed under Steele's direction. Soft cushions lined the floors, and strange elastic bands hung from the ceiling. The centerpiece was the large basin, now filled with the shimmering blue liquid. "You want to submerge the princess?" Calyx's voice rose an octave. The pressure could shatter her completely. Steele rolled her eyes. "The water's density has been perfectly calibrated to match her body's crystalline structure. It'll support her weight while allowing freedom of movement. Think of it as training wheels for her muscles." Princess Lunara stood at the basin's edge, wearing a specially designed protection suit that Steele had commissioned. "Will it hurt?" she asked, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. "No pain," no. Steele caught herself. "Sorry," another Earth saying. "No, it won't hurt. The water will feel like a gentle hug all around you. Ready to try?" With agonizing slowness, Lunara lowered herself into the basin. Her eyes widened as the liquid enveloped her. I feel light." "Exactly," Steele grinned. "Now try moving your arms. Gentle circles, just like we practiced on the cushions." As Lunara began to move, her crystalline form caught the blue liquid's glow, creating an ethereal light show in the chamber. For the first time in her life, she could move without fear of cracking. "Remarkable," a voice said from the doorway. King Zafrix entered, followed by his advisory council. "She's actually exercising without damage." "This is just the beginning," Steele assured him. "Once her confidence grows, we'll gradually decrease the liquid's density, making her work harder. Her body will adapt, growing stronger with each session." But not everyone shared the king's enthusiasm. Lord Vertex, head of the advisory council, watched with narrowed eyes. "Most irregular," he muttered to his companions, "allowing an alien to experiment on our princess with these primitive methods." "My methods may be primitive," Steele called out, her sharp hearing catching his words, "but they're proven." "Watch this," she turned back to Lunara. "Hey, Princess, remember that breathing exercise we practiced? Let's show them." Lunara nodded, then began a series of controlled movements synchronized with deep breaths. The liquid around her rippled in harmony with her motions. Suddenly, a small crystal began forming on her forearm, new growth, stronger than her original structure. Impossible. Calyx rushed forward, scanning the crystal with his instruments. Her body is actually generating reinforced crystal layers. Steel crossed her arms, satisfaction evident on her face. Not impossible, just science combined with good old-fashioned hard work. Later that night, after Lunara had retired to her chambers, Lord Vertex convened a secret meeting in the lower levels of the palace. This cannot continue, he declared to his assembled allies. The human's influence grows stronger by the day. Soon, the princess may actually become strong enough to rule. And that would be bad, because one counselor asked hesitantly. Vertex's crystalline form darkened. Because a strong heir means our chances of seizing power during the upcoming succession crisis vanish like stardust in a solar wind. We've spent years ensuring the princess remained weak, adding trace minerals to her food that prevented proper crystal formation. What do you suggest? The human must go, Vertex hissed. And if the princess happens to suffer an unfortunate accident during one of these barbaric training sessions, well, that would be most tragic, wouldn't it? None of them noticed the small cleaning drone in the corner, its recording crystals capturing every treasonous word. Steele had learned long ago that the best defense was good intelligence, and she'd made some interesting modifications to the palace's maintenance systems. Back in her quarters, Steele reviewed the drone's footage with grim satisfaction. "Game on, Sparkles," she muttered, already planning counter-moves. "You want to play rough? Let's see how you handle Earth-style justice." The throne room erupted in chaos as Lord Vertex slammed his ceremonial staff against the crystal floor. "By ancient law and custom," he announced, his voice cutting through the commotion, "I challenge Princess Lunara's right of succession through the trial of strength." The gathered nobles gasped. Steele, standing beside Lunara's training basin, clenched her fists. She'd been expecting something from Vertex after discovering his plot, but not this brazen move. "You dare?" King Zafrix rose from his throne, his form crackling with barely contained rage. "The trial hasn't been invoked in 10 generations. Which makes it the perfect time to ensure our future ruler has the strength to protect our empire," Vertex replied smoothly. "Unless, of course, you believe the princess is too fragile for such a challenge." Lunara pulled herself from the training basin, water cascading off her crystalline form. 3 months of Steele's training had already made a visible difference. Her crystal structure was denser, with a subtle iridescent sheen that hadn't been there before. "I accept," she declared, her voice ringing clear and strong. "No." King Zafrix and First Physician Calyx shouted simultaneously. My dear Calyx rushed forward, tentacles waving in distress. "The trial involves direct combat. Even with your improvements, you're not ready for." "I accept," Lunara repeated, louder this time. She turned to face Vertex directly. "Name your champion, Lord Vertex." A cruel smile spread across Vertex's face. "My son, Obsidian, will represent our house." He gestured to a towering figure who stepped forward from the shadows. Obsidian's crystal form was nearly black, reinforced with carbon lattices that made him virtually unbreakable. Steele stepped forward. "Your Majesty, request permission to continue training the princess for the trial." Denied, Vertex interjected. "The ancient laws are clear. Only Nexarian methods may be used in preparation for the trial. No more of your alien tricks." "The laws say nothing about who may advise the combatants," Captain Naira spoke up from her position near the throne. "Only that the training methods must be traditional." King Zafrix nodded slowly. "Captain Naira is correct. Steele may continue to advise, but traditional methods must be used for the next 30 days until the trial." Later in the private training chamber, Lunara paced while Steele reviewed ancient combat holocrons. "They think they've trapped us," the princess said, "forcing us to abandon your training methods." "They think wrong," Steele replied without looking up. "Everything we've done so far was just preparation for this. Your body is ready now for advanced crystal manipulation. But the traditional methods never worked for me before." Steele finally looked up, a fierce grin on her face. "That's because you were too weak to attempt them." But now she pointed to Lunara's arm, where new crystal growth sparkled. "Now you're strong enough to do something unprecedented. Something that'll make your ancestors proud and your enemies shake in their crystal boots." Lunara looked uncertain. "What do you mean?" Those traditional methods? They're actually brilliant. They're based on manipulating your crystalline structure through force of will. The problem wasn't the methods, it was that you didn't have the core strength to execute them. But now, Steele walked over to a shelf and pulled down an ancient text she'd had translated. See this technique? The crystal heart resonance? It's like the breathing exercises we've been doing, but turned up to 11. Vertex expects me to fail at traditional training, Lunara said slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. Exactly. He doesn't realize we've spent 3 months building the foundation you never had. It's like Steele's search for the right analogy, like trying to run before you can walk, before you couldn't even stand. Now you're ready to sprint. Lunara's form straightened, determination radiating from her like light through a prism. Then let's show them what a princess can do. Steele's grin turned predatory. Oh honey, we're going to show them what a warrior can do. The grand arena of Nexus Prime stretched toward the violet sky, like a massive geode split open to the stars. Crystalline seats rose in sweeping tiers, each facet designed to amplify the light of the triple moons. Today, those seats overflowed with spectators, their bodies creating a dazzling display of refracted light. Nice place, Steele whistled as she helped Lunara with her final preparations in the contestants' chamber. Though I got to say, beats me why a peaceful crystal people need such a hardcore fighting pit. The arena predates our peaceful era, Lunara explained, stretching as Steele had taught her. Back when different crystal houses fought for dominance, she paused, looking at her reflection in the polished wall. Her once fragile form now showed distinct layers of reinforced crystal growth, kind of like now. Above them, the announcement crystals hummed to life. The trial of strength begins. First round, Princess Lunara versus Guardian 3rd Class Nova. Steele squeezed Lunara's shoulder. Remember what we practiced. Let them underestimate you. The arena floor was a perfectly flat expanse of black crystal, its surface occasionally pulsing with veins of bioluminescent energy. Lunara took her position, facing a bulky crystalline warrior, whose form rippled with aggressive red energy. Begin. The crystal gong's note reverberated through the arena. Nova charged immediately, probably expecting an easy victory against the supposedly fragile princess. Lunara waited until the last possible moment, then moved exactly as Steele had taught her, not the traditional Nexarian dodge, but a fluid roll that would have made any human martial artist proud. Impossible, someone shouted from the noble's box. Nova spun around, clearly confused by the unfamiliar movement. Lunara seized the advantage, pressing her hands against the arena floor. The traditional crystal heart resonance technique had always failed her before, but now, with her strengthened core, the floor's energy veins suddenly pulsed, sending a wave of force that knocked Nova off balance. The crowd roared as Nova yielded, unable to recover his stance. Second round, Princess Lunara versus Battlemaster Crystal. This opponent was craftier, a veteran warrior who analyzed Lunara's movements carefully. The fight lasted longer, a deadly dance of crystal against crystal. But when Battlemaster Crystal attempted to use sonic resonance to shatter Lunara's form, she surprised everyone by harmonizing with the attack instead of resisting it. She's using the water training, Steele shouted triumphantly from the sidelines. Fluid adaptation. 2 more rounds followed, each opponent more challenging than the last. Lunara's new fighting style, a fusion of traditional crystal techniques and earth-inspired movements, continued to confound her opponents. Where they expected brittleness, they found flexibility. Where they looked for weakness, they discovered unexpected strength. But with each victory, she paid a price. Small cracks appeared along her arms, her breathing became labored. By the time the final round was announced, worried murmurs rippled through the crowd. Final round, the announcer's voice boomed, Princess Lunara versus Lord Obsidian. Obsidian stepped into the arena like a living shadow, his black crystal form absorbing light rather than refracting it. He towered over Lunara, his enhanced structure making him look more like a weapon than a person. Yield now, Princess, he rumbled, his voice like grinding stones, and I promise to make your retirement comfortable. Lunara's response was to shift into the ready stance Steele had drilled into her countless times. Retire this, she quipped, earning a laugh from her human trainer. The fight that followed would be talked about for generations. Obsidian's brute force approach met Lunara's innovative technique In a spectacular display of crystal combat, the arena floor cracked beneath their exchanges, energy veins flaring with each impact. But Obsidian's enhanced structure gave him a devastating advantage. A direct hit sent Lunara sliding across the arena, cracks spreading across her midsection. "Stay down," Lord Vertex called from the noble's box, barely concealing his glee. "Accept your weakness." Steel's voice cut through the crowd's roar. "Remember the basin, princess. Remember what the water taught you." Lunara closed her eyes, remembering the feeling of floating in that mineral-rich water. How it supported her, how it moved with her instead of against her. Her eyes snapped open, glowing with internal light. The crowd gasped as her crystal structure began to change. Instead of trying to be hard and unbreakable like obsidian, her form became more translucent, more fluid. The cracks in her structure filled with light. "What trickery is this?" Obsidian growled, launching himself forward for a finishing blow. The princess smiled, her form now rippling like liquid crystal. "Something new," she answered, preparing to meet his charge. Something unprecedented. Obsidian's charge met empty air as Lunara's form flowed around him like living water. Her crystalline structure had transformed into something never before seen on Nexus Prime, neither solid nor liquid, but a perfect synthesis of both states. "What have you done to yourself?" Obsidian snarled, his black crystal form pulsing with angry red energy. "I stopped fighting what I am," Lunara replied, her voice resonating with newfound power. "My weakness was trying to be something I'm not." She moved with liquid grace, each motion a perfect blend of Steel's training and ancient crystal techniques. Obsidian's powerful strikes passed through her transformed structure without causing damage, while her own attacks landed with surprising force, enhanced by the momentum of her fluid movement. From the noble's box, Lord Vertex leapt to his feet. "This is an outrage. She's using forbidden techniques." Actually, Captain Naira's voice rang out as she projected ancient texts onto the arena walls. "There's nothing in our laws against natural crystal evolution. The princess isn't using forbidden techniques, she's pioneered an entirely new form of crystal manipulation." Steel punched the air triumphantly. "That's my girl. Show them what adaptation really means." Obsidian, growing desperate, attempted to use his resonance attack, the same one that had shattered countless opponents before. But Lunara's fluid form absorbed the vibrations, redirecting them back at him. Cracks appeared in his supposedly unbreakable structure. "Impossible!" Lord Vertex screamed. "I demand this match be stopped. The princess is clearly using human sorcery or what?" King Zafrix's voice cut through the chaos. "Or proving that strength comes in many forms. That adaptation is more powerful than stagnation." He turned to face the crowd. "That sometimes we must look beyond our own world to grow." In the arena, the battle reached its crescendo. Obsidian, his perfect crystal structure now webbed with cracks, charged forward in one final, devastating attack. Lunara met his charge head-on, but instead of clashing with him, she flowed around and through his form like a tide of liquid crystal. As she passed through him, her transformed structure resonated with his crystal matrix. The crowd watched in awe as Obsidian's mighty form suddenly crystallized completely, frozen in mid-attack. "Do you yield?" Lunara asked, reforming behind him. A single crack ran up Obsidian's neck. "I yield," he managed, before his form shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces. The arena erupted in cheers as medical crystals quickly reformed Obsidian's consciousness in a new body, a standard safety procedure for crystal combat. But no one was watching him. All eyes were on Princess Lunara as her form shifted back to its original state, though now permanently changed. Her crystal structure retained a fluid quality, stronger and more adaptable than traditional crystal forms. "The victory goes to Princess Lunara," the announcer boomed. "The trial of strength is concluded." As celebrations broke out across the arena, Lord Vertex and his conspirators found themselves surrounded by royal guards. Captain Naira stepped forward, playing the drone's recording of their treasonous plotting for all to hear. Steel rushed to Lunara's side, grinning broadly. "Not bad for a fragile princess, huh?" "Thank you," Lunara replied, pulling her trainer into a very human hug. "For showing me that true strength isn't about being unbreakable." King Zafrix descended to the arena floor, his crystal form glowing with pride. "My daughter," he proclaimed, his voice carrying to every corner of the arena, "you have shown us all a new way forward. a path that honors our traditions while embracing change. As the triple moons rose higher in the violet sky, casting rainbow light through the crystal arena, Princess Lunara stood tall before her people. No longer the fragile heir who needed protection, but a warrior who had transformed weakness into unprecedented strength. "So," Steele said with a smirk, "still want to be tough as diamonds?" Lunara laughed, her crystalline form shimmering with its new, fluid grace. "No, I think I prefer being tough as steel."